In the first two sessions, we explored how Mary is generous with her time and her attention, focusing on Jesus and giving up her time to care for him. In this session, we will explore a third way she's generous, with her wealth. As a child, I loved pretty much any sport. There was a clear hierarchy though. Cricket was emphatically at the top, with football next. After that, I wasn't so bothered, and would watch anything, even if I was ill from school, golf. I was therefore a devotee of the UK TV programme A Question of Sport. Faded sporting celebrities trying to answer arcane sporting trivia, what's not to like? During the programme, they always played the Johnny Nash song, There Are More Questions Than Answers. And as a child, I didn't like it much, to be honest, but it has grown on me over the years. The song, perhaps surprisingly, has remarkable theological depth. In the chorus, Nash asks, "What is life? How do we live? What should we take? And how much should we give? What should we take? And how much should we give?" We need to take a step back before we can see how profound this line is. The wonderful writer and speaker on Christian giving, Jim Shepherd, talks about the 5 stages of giving. Each stage we get closer to understanding God's generous heart and how he wants us to use the resources he has given us. The first stage can be summarised as, what do I do with what I earn? The money is mine. I earned it, and I get to choose what to do with it. The next stage is, what do I do with what God has given me? So we are getting our heads around the fact the money is God's, but it is still our call what we do with it. The third stage is, what does God want me to do with what God has given me? So now we understand that both God has given us everything and we should use what God has given us for what God wants. The fourth stage, I'm guessing you can see where this is going by now, is, what does God want me to give from what God has provided? So now we are thinking not about how we spend the money God has given, but how we give some of it away. The fifth and final stage is, what does God want me to keep from what God has provided? So we realise what we have is a gift, and rather than seeing it principally as something we keep and give some away, we see it as something we largely give away and just keep what we need. So these are the 5 discipleship stages of giving. The move from asking ourselves how much of our money should we give away to how much of God's money should we keep is one of the great discipleship challenges of generous giving. And this is what Johnny Nash nails in his song, What is life? How do we live? What should we take? And how much should we give? Amazing, no? This is exactly how Mary sees her gift. Let's look back at our key verse in John 12. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. Mary saw what she had as God's, so she was just giving back what was already his. Her gift to Jesus cost a year's salary. It was incredibly generous. You might even say extravagant. But she had just seen firsthand her brother raised from the dead. So really anything she gave was utterly insignificant in return. And this is key to unlocking generosity. The realization of God's extraordinary love for us. Mary saw it and gave generously in response. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but this is so important if we want to grow in generosity. It was the realization of God's extraordinary love for us that unlocked it. If we have a nagging sense we should be living more generously, and I'm guessing if you are watching or listening to this, then that might well be true, the best thing we can do is not to look at our bank statements or a spreadsheet, but to look at the life of Christ. To learn afresh what divine generosity is, to see and know once more how deeply and profoundly and completely we are loved by our Creator. Mary's generosity with her wealth is immensely difficult for us to live up to. For one thing, we live in a world which tells us we are what we earn and what we own. There are many, many enticing ways to spend our money. There are huge social pressures and expectations over what we should buy and how we should live. It is really tough to forego things. And we live in a time where many of us struggle with debt and where tiny houses come with huge mortgages. So to emulate Mary's generosity is not easy. I love the New Revised Standard Translation of Galatians 5. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity. This is so important. To be able to give is itself a spiritual gift. It is a glorious divine paradox. We can't respond generously to God's generosity to us unless God gives us the gift of generosity in the first place. Our generosity is built on the foundations of God's generous gift, freely given to us. Praying that God may give us the spiritual gift of generosity is the starting point for a generous life. So, being generous with our wealth is faith-filled and countercultural. As Jesus says in Matthew 6, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." It puts money in its place. It grows God's economy, where generosity grows more generosity, where abundance, not scarcity, shapes our thinking and our behaviours. It is the beautiful irony of giving. We receive more than we give. All this is there in Mary's generosity with wealth. It's more than a spontaneous act, though. It is an ingrained way of being. And so to my last thought on this. If we are to be generous with wealth, we need to think this through. It needs to be planned and woven into the way we live our life. It's why the 1% challenge can be so powerful. Every year, aim to give 1% more of your net income away. This gives you time to adjust and to plan ahead, to think carefully about how you will live with less. Generosity then becomes purposeful and ingrained, and it becomes ever more who we are, and we become ever more like the generous God who created us.